everyone. I'm back this week with some more beautiful spring flowers. Just going to take this off. I'm Christine. I'm coming to you from the Rhoda Center in Teaneck, New Jersey. And doing quite a nice job renovating the outside of the building. It's looking really beautiful. They're doing a terrific job in the last year that things have been shut down. All right, so this week, as you can well see in your gardens up here in the Northeast, the tulips are just abounding. They're just beautiful. Some daffodils are still fresh. There's hyacinths are out. The forsythia are still in bloom, and again, the blooming trees, you can't see, but out these windows, there's some beautiful white pear trees in bloom and some pink cherry trees just up off Queen Anne Road there. They're just spectacular. So today we're going to focus and concentrate on tulips. And I'm not going to be doing a still life setup, but I will talk about setting up a still life setup for you if you're going to paint at home, since you may have some tulips you want to clip in your gardens. I know I feel funny clipping tulips from my gardens. They look so beautiful outside. You put a lot of work and effort into planting the bulbs in the fall, but the stores right now are carrying nice bundles of tulips. They're more the miniature size. So again, these are silks, but they're nice and large, so they're giving us a lot of bright color today. And again, everything about flowers, as far as an artist's vantage point, is their beautiful curvilinear lines, their delicateness, their smooth textures, how they blow in the wind, and again, it's that big pop of color. Even the ones that are white, again, can offer a nice open space within a dark or mid-value bouquet, or planting some whites in your gardens too, just to break up all the darker colors. So we'll talk about that. There's a lot of things to discuss. All right, so this is a different flower. It's growing from a bulb similar to the crocus and the daffodils that we've been doing the past weeks. And they're usually single flower to a stem, and usually one bulb may produce one stem, sometimes more than one stem, and usually on off of every stem are 3 of these long kind of rabbit ear type beautiful leaves. So their leaves are very different from the daffodils or the crocus. They're wide, they grow tall. Usually they're not as tall as the flower, but sometimes they'll evolve and curl and furl, and if you were to spread them out, their heights would be as tall as the tulip on its stem. But they do have a tendency to flop and curl over and bend, again, with the wind. If you're going to be photographing some tulips, if you don't have some in your property and you go out around your towns, all of your big municipal buildings, a lot of big office compounds have gone overboard with planting hundreds of tulip bulbs. Where I live, we have a lot of high-rise buildings, and our grounds are just inundated up and down with beautiful tulip flower beds, some with mixed colors, other with just a solid passage of color in large blocks. So again, you can see the difference in the kind of mood that these colors evoke in you selecting a choice of color for the tulips. You also, if you're going to put them in a vase, you also have choice of vases or containers that you may have at home, and how you may like the shape of one container, but feel free to change the color or the value of the container. So for instance, it's just a nice hammered tin. It's silver, the shape is nice. You may not like the color, it's going to be like a deep gray, but again, laying down this kind of peachy orange piece of cloth here, you're getting a lot of bounce color right on the shiny tin. So I'm getting some reflective, beautiful hot oranges down here. Sometimes if the colors are hanging down, some of those colors would reflect on the vase or container if they were white or a shiny ceramic vase. Here we have a see-through purple glass. So we're bringing some of the purple in this bouquet down to the purple over there. This color here, is we've got 2 different variations of color on the trim in here, but it's picking up some of the hotter reds or orangey reds that you'll see in a few of these tulips back here, and introducing a hotter red. So we're carrying this color from up here also to down there. I like dropping some pieces of fruit that maybe are in the same family of colors that we have up in the flower or bouquet area, just so we have a little more harmony and we bring some of those colors down below. Again, I've talked about this last week. So when you're arranging something, I put a neutral wall behind this so we're not overwhelmed with the yellow painted walls in here in the classroom, though they're cheery and bright. They're too conflicting. and overwhelming. They're going to overpower. We want to have these flowers like really sing. So again, having the neutral wall here, neutral tabletop, a neutral vase, it's allowing these colors to really pop. If you can see back here on the color wheels back there, I have a chart of complementary colors on the chart with the squares, and then we have a color wheel. So anything that's in your pinks or hot reds, these are beautiful warm colors that are opposite the greens on the color wheel. So nature itself is giving us this beautiful vibration of offering complementary colors with your offering of cool pinks, hot pinks, cool reds, and hot reds, with all the greenery that's in the stems and the flowers. So it's another reason why when you see something that's brilliant as this is actually from my dad's garden from years ago. He had a big circle in the front he always liked these red tulips, and he didn't like the pointy ones. There are some, again, there's so many different varieties. There's thousands of hybrids of tulip shapes. So again, I'm sure when you're shopping for your bulbs for next year, that you kind of are drawn to a certain color or even a certain shape of the tulip. Even though it's a similar shape, which is a cup shape, they usually have the standard, I'd say the more simplified standard tulip, has 6 petals. There are some more complex tulips that have multiple petals, something like this, that are a little fancier. There are also some tulips that are in there's parrot tulips, which have some beautiful striped, variegated colors, like multiple colors in the tulip, and then they'll have like a feathery, textured, ragged edge. So those are they're different hybrids. Again, you can mix those with the standards or just go with your fancier tulips. It's all up to you. All right, so here we have, there's some beautiful greens. The leaves on this particular type of tulip is like a darker green, and this was taken in full sunlight. There's some other tulips that may be in the pink family or yellow, and the greens are more of a yellow green and a lighter value green. So not only does the color change on the specific hybrid of the tulip, but the color of your leaf also changes. There's some beautiful leaves in some of these standard tulips too that have, they may be green, but they have like red veins, like a variegated red or pink in them. And I also like to throw in, if you look at this painting here, I have a lot of the red. So I've got a variety of blue violets, red violets. I've got some hot orange, I have some yellow to red tulips in here, but I brought some of those reds and oranges into my leaves. I brought some purples, I mixed purple with some greens to create these kind of neutral, dark oblique leaves that are existing way back in the weaving of the leaf pattern. But it's nice, you will see these in nature, to have some of those reds and even purples in the veins of the leaves, and it's nice to bring that in. I feel it brings, instead of having too strict a solid green mass of leaves and stems on the bottom versus all these bright colors on the top, it brings some of those colors down into the foliage and ties the painting together, makes it a little more harmonious. All right, so I will be drawing on here shortly. I just want to talk about artists. And again, some of you out there are not watercolorists. You may be some of my drawing students working in colored pencils or charcoal or pastel. So again, you may want to just isolate one flower, 2 flowers, just to concentrate on the form and the beauty of a single flower or a few flowers off of one stem. So I put up an example of some of these, and again, you can see the difference of having a painted background versus no painted background over here. So again, if you're going to go with a white unpainted background, you need to get a little stronger in saturation of your colors so that they boldly stand out against that massive white background. And again, what's important here is to have, even though we're looking at a pretty solidly packed bed of tulips, which you'll see a lot in some of these commercial lots, as an artist, you want to have some interesting negative spaces in between. So again, we have like 3 rows, so we're creating a distance of maybe a foot of having a row of tulips here, here, and there, maybe a foot and a half to create, we're suggesting a depth of field here. I also sized my tulip shapes and my leaves down, so making them smaller in size as they appear farther back, suggesting that they're growing maybe a foot and a half behind the front row So again, by using linear perspective, we're scaling things down as they appear farther back in space. So you're going to be drawing them smaller in scale, and we're going to be overlapping larger examples in the front row, as we would see in a nice size walkway or garden plot. All right, so again, so in scaling those down, you also want to tone down the saturation of color and maybe just lighten up, meaning add a little more water to the paint, so that these flowers that appear farther back in a thick bed of tulips will also appear looking as if they are existing farther back in space, because they're not as strong in color, they're not as large, they're not as bright, and it's really helping that illusion of creating like a three-dimensional depth of field here. If you're outside and you have overhead light, the breadth of these tulips, they're mostly similar to a cup. So again, if we have this over a stem, so here's my stem, so watch the lighting on my finger, it starts to get dark, okay? So usually as you see the tulips, they're blocking the sunlight, so the upper part of your stem will be in shadow here, and as the stem goes farther down, it's picking up some more sunlight. You also may have some interfering leaves of the neighboring plants on the side that also may create some cast shadows across some of your stems and some of your leaves as they intertwine and trying to portray, a garden bed like this. Okay, so let's talk about how these are probably true to size. Again, that front row is true to size, and I've overscaled them down so that I'm overstating that, giving that illusion of distance from front row to middle row to back row here. Here I'm zooming in, I'm enlarging the size, I'm scaling up the actual size of the tulip. So here I'm taking the flower out of context, out of its conventional standard size that we're accustomed to, 2 to 3 inches in the flower. So we're really highlighting it and making it an icon, almost giving like a surrealistic impression, a real portrait of this particular type of pink tulip, which has some beautiful yellow golden stamens that you can see, and then of course you have the central pistil. So unlike the crocus that we did a few weeks ago, which some of them had multiple pistils, the standard tulips usually has one pistil in the middle. It's usually kind of a white color, and it usually has like 3 little stigmas or knobs at the top, so it's kind of like a little triangular shape. Then you'll have it, there's 6 petals, there'll be 6 stamens on all sides. So again, you can see inside here, there's a pistil and there's some stamens falling around, like you can see over here. And here's a really good look at that central pistil, which is white, but it's looking red because it's reflecting the red, the interior of the flower. At the base of these tulips, there's a beautiful pattern. Sometimes it's showing up black here, but close up in person, it's almost like a deep ultramarine blue with like a yellow stripe around that center. So it's quite lovely. And then coming up from it is that white pistil, and the stamens in this particular type of tulip is, the stamens are dark, right? Like almost a dark color matching that dark blue that's in the center. So that's very pretty, and you'll see that in some species and some hybrid standards, how interesting the centers are. Some are not as interesting, but these are quite lovely. Notice also that the petals on these are rounded, almost like a tongue shape. Again, there's some tulips that have more of a pointed tip to them, like this. This is more of a rounded. I'm just looking at something else I might have here. That's something here. So this particular tulip here, here's some rounded tulips. Here's a real mixture, different colors, real variety of tulips. You can see the real pointed, and usually the cup on those are quite deep, or almost like a champagne glass. So they're deeper and they come up to a point. So again, here's multiple petals versus a pointed tip on the tulip, rounded, more ovate. So this again is showing you the different varieties of these tulips. So now as watercolors, and even as colored pencil artists, we're always looking to save the white of our paper to come through for our highlighted areas. So those highlights, again, some of these petals in broad sunlight outside would photograph with, looks like white tips. Any surface that's kind of facing into the sun, so this is a tip of a petal, you can just leave the white of the paper at the top of that petal. even the tips or the edges of some of those beautiful, deep, kind of mid-value leaves may have a slick edge that's reflective, and I would leave those white also. So leave an unpainted white edge on even some of the stems, on the edges of the leaves. Some of the leaves may furl. Sometimes they're so wide that they start to curl in, especially as they age. And of course, the tips of these of the petals, you'll see these highlights here are almost looking like a light yellow. So as far as a watercolor painting goes, I would probably leave those white and unpainted. Same I would do in a colored pencil drawing too. If I was doing a charcoal sketch on, let's say, like a mid-value paper like this, if we were to photograph these and print them in black and white, these would all be mid-values. These, even though they're white, there's some beautiful mid-values within the white. So again, you can see look how pure white these are with these subtle low values within them. And then some of these start reflecting some of the pinks and purples on the right side of the cup shapes on here that are contoured this way, picking up all those reflective colors. And some of these are picking up the bounce color off the ground. So again, white on a tulip cup or a white porcelain cup or a white porcelain vase is going to pick up these subtle light darks that are existing all around that particular tulip. And so keep that in mind. And again, these do make for lovely charcoal sketches on, I would use like a light valued paper with a little tint, and bring in some white chalk and maybe some soft charcoal like willow sticks, and then bring in some dark pencils with some compressed charcoal to do a nice study of the light falling on these beautiful smooth surfaces. Again, a lot of blending involved when you're dealing with pastels or your charcoals to kind of capture, again, that fleshy, soft, sensual tissue that these soft petals are. You've all dropped petals off your bouquets over the years, so you know how these petals feel. So we don't want to have any hard, scratchy, stiff, dark lines that aren't blended. So use your finger, use some blending stumps, use your eraser to soften some of those highlights or mid-value areas to, again, capture the texture that most flowers have. And that also goes for their smooth leaves and the smooth stem. These are all smooth surfaces compared to something rougher like a bark surface. All right, and then I talked about fruit, bringing some of the greens down here, your choice of tabletop cover, tablecloth, or even some kind of a little porcelain vase or cup creamer could bring in some of the colors up here in a simple still life. This is just really playing up the textures. Again, everything's smooth and simple. I don't have patterns on the wall back here. At home you may have wallpaper back here. Tone the patterns down. If you have a pattern on your vase, tone that down, because you really want to highlight the focal point or the lovely flowers that we're presenting. Let's see what else I'm going to talk about here. Okay, so in doing like just a quick study, if you let's say out in your garden, and I know some of our garden beds, the winds and the storms we've had here have really crushed, we lost a lot of petals. You may have just one or two tulips that are still viable and looking good. You can either photograph them or cut them and bring them inside, but to do a study of one or two makes for an interesting piece where you don't have to be overwhelmed with drawing so many, fitting in a container top or in a vase, or here we're taking just like a section out of the garden. So again, these two I've enlarged, both the flower shapes. You can see how they're more of a study, really enlarging and taking them out of context and just showing, again, I'm showing you a range of sizes as they open, because if you do see these close together in a garden, you'll see some in their bud stage where the petals are all tight. And then you'll see some as they start to open. So there's different stages of growth. And that's nice to show, just to have some variety. Sometimes you'll see a bed of flowers, all the bulbs were planted at the same time and they all open at the same time. So it may look a little, maybe too stiff and static a composition, that you're just drawing them as they are, with the same stage of growth, the same height, the same color. So I always encourage you to add a little more variety, or just to break up the space somehow. This is an example, so these two are an example of a cluster of the similar hybrid growing together. And again, so you can see they're similar light, I'm looking at these and I can see how while my hot yellows and reds and pinks were wet, I dropped in some cerulean cobalt. So those are two blues that are opposite your hot reds and oranges on the color wheel. And when they mix with your hot colors, they're going to create a neutral or gray, which is going to offer a nice shadow color. So again, these are away from the sun. I left a lot of unpainted white around the tops of these, so they almost look like they're backlit. I also left a lot of unpainted white on the edges of my stems and my leaves, so it's giving that backlit look. I think I always paint in watercolors. I paint my flowers first, then the greens, and if I am going to paint the background, I come in last, because by that time my water's dirty, and I like using dirty water to contaminate the greens or the neutral color of my background, so it's not a color like straight out of a commercial tube of paint. Okay, so here you can see there's like a whole row of these. Just to break it up with a more modern composition, I have these two kind of bleeding out, so that kind of breaks up the top space up in here. I have a little more open area on the left side of this bed of similar tulips, so that the left side is different than the right side. These three are all touching and connected, whereas all of these are not. So we've got some interesting negative space falling in between the flower heads as well as the stems and the leaves on that side. So I have a nice difference, even though they're the same type of flower, we have a nice difference in variety from the right side of the bed to the left. Okay, so and then same here where I have my focal flower. It's not dead center, it's a little off to the right of center. I always talk about trying to have your vase or your still life setup a little off center. I put these here because I purposely put them there. They are all slightly off center. This is slightly to the left. This is definitely, you can see it's more obvious to the left. This one's kind of centered, although introducing the lemon over here, and again, having a different number of tulips on the right side of the bouquet from here to there with the different number of stems and leaves, kind of at least brings a little more variety into a very strong vertical composition. Same here, we've got a nice tin, and instead of drawing it with the two handles evenly placed on either side, I've turned the canister so that we're seeing a more foreshortened look, and we're seeing all of the handle here and less of it there. My lighting is coming in from the right, so this cast shadow is also helping to keep this looking too off-center or too vertical a composition. And again, you can say I have more flowers on the right, I have less flowers on the left, and we have a little more open spaces here. I'm drawing these because usually though they will bend over the top or neck of your vase or canister. So we have a nice variety of the direction that the flower heads are facing. So these are kind of tilting a little bit to the right. These are facing upward at 1 o'clock. This guy's facing down here like at 3:30. This one's just flopping over and almost looking at us. We're probably standing up above table height looking down at this. Last week I talked us through drawing ellipses and where our eye level is. So the fact that the ellipse at the base of the vase or canister is turned up and this is turned up means the eye level for this particular scene is about up here. So again, so you want to make sure that as we're drawing these, that it's nice to show some of the insides of these, how dark the insides of these get as they just start to open. So again, if this is, I'm going to just use my hand as a tulip. So as the petals close, you can see that there's very little light inside. That's how dark it's going to look inside all of these little closed tulip cups as they're starting to open. Okay, now we jump to, here's a nice horizontal movement. So again, you have a vertical format where you're capturing the height of your vase and the tulips. You need to scale these down. These are probably life size. You know, there are tulips that are quite small. So these could be life size. I really think, I know I have these vases. So these are actually a little smaller than what these would exist in real life. Not by much, but they're slightly small. And that's so I can fit them on a standard sheet of this watercolor paper. Here's the same size paper on turning horizontally, so the horizontal format. So usually a vertical formats give you more of a strength and like a rigid, powerful force of this vertical action in your composition. Usually horizontals, which would refer to seascapes, landscapes, is a more calm, relaxed format. So here we're cutting off. This was a real tall, this is actually this canister here. So here's the top of this canister. It's definitely smaller than what we see here. And my tulips are smaller than these here. This was drawn and painted from probably 2 bouquets I had. And again, I'm spacing them out so they have a roominess to them. They're not as tightly packed as this group is over here. So then that's a different look, where these are real tight, these beautiful white tulips down here in that dark vase, versus here these are just kind of flopping out. We have a nice variety of warm colors. There's some beautiful golden yellows. This is almost like a peach fleshy color. We have some hot pink and purple in here, red violets, and then we have some like one red and these kind of hot oranges. And again, if you can see, I don't know how good the detail is from the camera distance we have here, but I'm using a lot of the red colors and purples to drop in either when the leaves are wet and both when they're dry, to do a little bit edging or diffuse some of those linear, there's our linear striations patterns on most of the tulip leaves, and some of the leaves have them more pronounced, that they're really jumping out as a linear pattern. So I've introduced, again, some hard line, and they're not continuous lines or lost and found lines, to do some of the edging here. You can see a few little white highlights, as unpainted whites that I'm using the dry paper come through for highlights on this particular flower that's tilting and just picking up some reflections on those little curved tips of the petals up there. So here we have this is a nice little example too I have a lot of texture going on. Again, some of those feathering, if you look real closely on a tulip leaf, similar to an iris leaf, there's a pattern of veins that in some tulips it's more pronounced, it's more visible, and other tulips you don't even see it, especially at a height from us standing up and looking down 5 feet at the garden. But I did make some pronounced textures on a few of the tulips in this area. You could see, you could take, I'm just going to use so if you had a thirsty brush, if I wet this, and let me just wet this, and I split the hairs. When I split the hairs, you see I'm getting like a cone effect over here. So after your tulips dry, I came back with, let's say, yellow ochre, maybe a touch of orange, and I came in and I just painted in these little vein patterns, like a feather. It's like the ribs on a feather, and you'll see them on some of the tulip petals. Then there's some striations on the leaves. I just came in and scratched out. So here's like a dark leaf that's a little lower in the bouquet. I scratched out while that paint was wet to show some of the veins are now light against dark, versus painting in. Here's a tulip where they're light against dark over here, and here they're dark against the light back where I just painted them in. So I didn't do that to every tulip. I didn't do that to every stem or leaf. I just did a few. Again, when the eye of the viewer picks that up, your brain just kind of fills in that they're all done that way. So it's showing you how you can paint these as a watercolors. The idea is to paint them quickly with a freshness and a spontaneity to them. And the detail doesn't have to be overkill. You don't have to give me every vein or give the viewer, not just me, but it's not necessary. Just a little bit of detail is nice, and I'm just showing you how you can put some of those striations in while the tulip cup is wet or while the leaf is wet. Again, so we've got these striations on the petals, on the leaves, and then it's picking up that beautiful, these ridges that you see in some of these tin containers that are quite fashionable these days. Okay, so I want to just point out neutral background. So again, I enjoy picking out the color of, you want the color to really pop. So by sticking with more of a neutral background, I mean, for me to go in here with like a bright neon green background or a dark purple, it's not going to let the beautiful delicacy of this icy pink tulip, really have its heyday. So I'm coming in with like kind of a bluish gray, and I painted my tulips first, and I came back later, and I worked wet into wet. Maybe I worked on this corner where I pre-wet this negative area, and I came in with, I'm trying to think of what I'm seeing here. It looks like I have a little touch maybe of yellow ochre or raw sienna with 2 blues, probably like a sky blue or even like a Payne's gray. And a lot of water first. So again, it's a nice neutral color, it's cool, giving you some contrast and temperature from the delicate warmth of these kind of peachy two tulips here. And then I gave a little more warmth on the inside. A lot of times the inside of the petal may have a little bit different color, close in color and value to the outside of the petal, but sometimes just slightly different in temperature, but maybe you know, just either darker or lighter, depending on how the light's falling inside the cup. So I'm looking at this cup here, so again, for the camera's sake, so you can see, looking at the inside here, I'm seeing a lot of light. So it's an overhead light. It's bounced on here, and this is all in shadow. So imagine 6 petals all coming together like this. So it was dangling this way. And I'm trying to look, you can see how it's getting some bounce light up in here versus this is dangling farther downward where it's not getting any light. So this would be darker in here. So these are just little things of observation we all need to make as we're looking at our tulip specimens, whether it's from a photograph we took or an actual bouquet that we have right in front of us. And it helps to give a nice variety of the outside of the tulips as well as the insides. And again, so we've got a lot of value changes going on the outside surface of these beautiful contoured, convex petals. We've got some interesting dark on the inside of the petals as they face away from the sunlight. So again, here these are concave in here and they get darker. And the same thing happens, especially tucked into a vase, how the leaves and stems crisscross and overlap each other, causing some cast shadows within this beautiful rhythm of your designing of how the leaves exist wrapped around the flowers, within the flowers, and also how they change in their relationships being tucked into a tight neck of a vase or can versus having a little more freedom of just kind of flopping out as they do down in here in a garden bed. Okay, so now compositions, again, some of us gravitate, if you want to do something a little more abstract, then your composition could certainly be less standard or less symmetrical as some of these are right here. And maybe a design pattern like this would welcome, maybe more of a designing piece and abstracting from the tulips and the leaves. These have the point, this is one of those tulips with the bell, it's like a reverse bell shape, and they have like a point to them. So here's one that's more open. Again, this is really your focal point, and it's kind of attached to this one here. This is bleeding out. And again, I'm creating some interesting positive and negative shaped leaves and stems in all the 4 quadrants that are different from each other. So again, if you draw an imaginary X, an axis, vertical and horizontal, and you break up your spaces, keep this in mind as you're plotting and drawing and designing your composition, is to always have the positive and negative shapes different from each other. So here, there's a lot of mid-values in here, but I did save some unpainted whites on the edges of the tulip petals, as well as on the leaves, even some of the stems. And then I came in with some really rich darks, almost looking like some peat moss or mulch, with some deep, you can see some burnt sienna, maybe some ultramarine blue, that I fed into my dark negative shades, which really popped all the mid-values. There's mid-values within the tulips, there's light to mid-values in tulips, and light to mid-values on the leaves and petals. Okay, what else am I talking about? So let's start drawing some specimens here, just to get in the flow of doing some sketches. So again, I suggest if you have a sketchbook at home or even a pad of newsprint, and I have a pad of newsprint next to me. So these were done on newsprint. And I started with this flower. I have it open, and I was looking at my dad's flowers here. So even though these are all open, I drew 2 more that are at a closed stage, not that they're all open. Again, you can do whatever you want, but it's a nice way of saying, okay, here's a piece of paper, it's 9 by 12. How many tulips would look well on this? And you don't want to overwhelm a small 9 by 12 piece. And these are close to life size. So this is really your focal point, and I'm paying more attention to that. I got a little designing with it, but I did have fun pressing down, getting a variety of thick to thin lines. So you can see that the outlines are a little heavier, and my detail, I gave a little bit of detail and shadowing on the inside of the petals. Again, all of these petals have like a central seam. So don't know if we could pick up some of this, but all of these petals will have, there's these little kind of feathery ribbing going off to this, off the central seam. It's like a double seam here. So it's almost like a fish bone, a fish skeleton. You got a main seam, and then there are these little offshoots over here. So these are things that look nice in bringing your flower designs, you know, into some kind of a more formal, thought-out piece, such as this, which we can talk about. So here, this is pen and ink versus this is just using a marker on a piece of newsprint. But it's getting me involved with. I start with this, I connect the stem, I don't bring the stem all the way down. I start with one leaf, two leaves, I introduce two more flowers and connected them, showing their stems and how they're all coming down, kind of off the page here. So we're not seeing where they're connected to the root, the bulb, and the earth, but that's not that as important as the beautiful negative spaces that I've left, allowing these to kind of move and just breathe and exist. So it's important to just for you to get familiar and with drawing a few of these, maybe isolated, 2 or 3 bulbs with a few leaves, just to kind of get into the rhythm of the flower. And this is a little tighter where, again, I offered, they're all growing pretty tight in like a garden bed situation. And this one is the focal point. I had to just tilt out a little more. I'm showing just the tops of their stems. I think I have 2 leaves way back in here. And then I darken or blacken my negative spaces versus leaving a white negative space like this. So again, they're light against a dark background. But it's a nice design piece. And you can go into a series of these. And again, you can print these on cardstock. These are nice. You can shrink these down and make stationery for yourself. I've done quite a few of these, and my daughter's actually put them in, she's putting them in a series of some black frames with some nice white cut mats, and they look quite nice together, so I'm working on a collection of that for her. So let's just loosen up. I'm just going to hold this, and just to show you what you would do, and I suggest doing, which I try to have my students do before they jump into a drawing for a painting, or jumping into a more formal pastel or a more formal 5-hour colored pencil piece. So let's just do some open tulip shapes here. So I'm just looking at some of these over here. So I recommend, again, if I was working in pencil, I have a marker so you all could see it. I would be working at home with a pencil. So I would start out with some kind of a loose, round shape, like so. And again, if we think of that cup shape, I'm looking at these here. So if I was to draw a cup, this is like a small elliptical circle for the base of my tulip, and I have this pistil coming up over here, like so. I've got some stamens coming up over here. So we're going to be seeing, all of this is going to be foreshortened. We're looking inside, I'm standing up looking inside this tulip shape here. So I'll start, there will be 6 petals. So let's start with the main petal that's over here. This is my guide. I'm looking at this guy right over here. So again, I've given myself a closed perimeter for the size of my tulip. I may put some more tulips here. Let's start with the focal point, which is, again, it's off center. Here's our 4 quadrants, and I'm off center. So here's my center that's just giving my perimeter, and I will have, this is like this beautiful kind of a furled, ruffled edge, and we're seeing the bottom side of this big tulip leaf that's basically coming out like this in the front, and then we're going to be working our way around. So we're going to have another, we'll go underneath, we're going to have another leaf that's, petal rather, that's over here, another one that's over here, and now we start to see the top of this one that's kind of coming down in here. We have another one that's up over here, and then there's one in between, back over here. So these 2 are overlapping that. So I've just quickly drawn the likeness of this open cup-shaped tulip that's over here, and again, it's that photograph's taken from looking down. And go back to your pistil and just follow through. This is where your stem is going to be. So I'm just coming down. My pencil or my marker is not touching the paper. I'm just going to come down, and there's your stem. So we've just quickly drawn the likeness of this open red tulip. Nice start. So again, we have a limited 9 by 12 piece of paper. I'm not going to overwhelm. I can never fit all of that on here. But it's a nice start for you just to loosen up. So again, I'm going to draw another tulip. So this is going to overlap. This is the main focal point. I want you to see it's touching. So here's our 4 quadrants. And it's touching all 4 quadrants. But the main part of it is in this lower quadrant over here. So let's draw another tulip that's maybe up over here. So I have it touching 3 quadrants, and it'll also be from the vantage point that we're seeing here. So we're not seeing as much as the center. So maybe we'll just do a little bit of those stamens over here. And I'm gonna, again, start with, we're seeing a little bit of this tulip petal over here, and maybe a little one over here. And I need to fit maybe 3 more back here. So the center one is going to be overlapping those 2. So I drew that one first, and we're going to fit in the petal in between both of those there. Okay, so that's tulip number 2. So the pistil to this is going to be right here. So if I come down, there's the stem. So we want the stem to really follow through the center of where it's attached to that pistil. It's going dead center in the middle of your tulip, okay? All right, so that's 2 tulips, and maybe we'll do maybe part of one off here. So again, just to break it up, I want it more asymmetrical. So I'm gonna have one up here, but it's gonna be running off the page. I suggest in a small piece of paper like this, maybe stick with an odd number of 3, and you don't need to draw like the full size of all 3. I'm just drawing the full size of 1. So we've got part of the second one, and now up here, I'm gonna have one bleeding out. So I'm gonna draw a semicircle up there, and I'm looking at this guy over here. So I'm gonna draw this petal that's coming up. We have a little bit of an indent on like this tongue shape. The second petal here, a little bit of that petal there, maybe a little bit of this there, and then maybe we'll do a couple of those stamens showing up. So we're now just seeing the bottom of that. Imagine your pistil is right here, so we're going to draw a stem that's coming down, and maybe we'll see it come down over here. So now I've just made a nice composition, but it's loosened me up. I'm studying, I'm really observing how these petals are formed. It's more difficult to draw a foreshortened open one than it is to draw these little cup-shaped ones for sure. And then how we're going to treat all this nice negative space with not overwhelming these, but let's introduce some of these wonderful sword-like leaf shapes. So I'm looking down here and I'm seeing a big leaf that's actually kind of coming up on either side of this. So if we were to darken, this is a leaf, I would leave my stem a light value and darken the leaf just behind it. So some of your leaf shapes could be dark versus some of them could be light. Let's just come in with another. I'm going to introduce an angle over here. So it's a nice oblique. So we've got 3 kind of leaning this way. So I'm introducing a leaf that's going in the opposite direction. It counterbalances all of the movements that we have with these leaning tulips over here. So that's one leaning that way. That may be in and out of. So again, if we go and shadow these, and I'm going to shadow them using linear strokes that are taking the vein pattern of our tulip leaf. I'm having this leaf also like run out of the picture page. So that's 2 dark leaves, and then we'll just do a couple of other. I'm going to run up some tulip shapes. So there's a leaf that's running behind there. Maybe we'll introduce another leaf that's up here, and then let's introduce like maybe another. I'm going to have another tulip leaf here, but I'm going to have another one cross it diagonally. So I've introduced some tulip leaves that are growing from the base, from the same bulb, but yet I'm still maintaining a lot of nice open space. It's still a nice asymmetrical composition. All right, and again, you can go from mid values to light to dark. And you have a lot of fun shading and shadowing what's going on in here. So again, you can notice the light's falling on the lower part of here, but yeah, this is a real dark contrasting center. And the tops of these petals are cupped up like this. So if you look at the light on my finger, those are the petals. So as you go into color, whether this ends up being a charcoal or pastel, or a colored pencil or watercolor, if you start coloring these, and I'm just going to use like some nice curved strokes, they're cupped up so that these are dark and the light's falling in the lower center. So I'm just using nice contoured lines to shadow and creating a little more the 3rd dimension here. These would be coming in, and I'm just darkening up near the outer tips like so, and then these would be dark over here. So now we're creating a 3-dimensional look. And that's how you're going to proceed. You start with an outline drawing of contour lines, and then you come back in with some shading and shadowing. no matter what medium that you're doing. So if you were painting with watercolors, you could use round brushes, flat brushes. You would start, again, I would pre-sketch a nice laid out plan, a design. Put in your elements, your leaves, your stems, and your flowers in some kind of a composition that you like, that you're happy with. And again, you can see from up here, there's very traditional standard symmetrical compositions versus more asymmetrical compositions over here that you can play with. And I encourage you to certainly do more than one drawing and one painting of these. I've done hundreds. I've got portfolios filled with tulips and different flowers, and I'm still going. I love drawing flowers. I love painting them. So it's wonderful for you to set yourself up. It's encouraging you to kind of proceed more intellectually in how you can use one particular shape, a different color tool or whatever, and present it so many different ways with other a higher number of flowers, just a few, 1 or 2 or 3 flowers, a few leaves and stems, again, in different mediums. And working in different mediums kind of may help you before you approach your watercolors. Remember, watercolors have a nice fresh look. It's kind of tough to go to, I'd say, a tight colored pencil drawing to a loose watercolor, but working in like markers or even some of the charcoals is certainly a nice beginning for you to loosen up and to try different mediums, and also encourage you to be a little more creative in more asymmetrical compositions or going off from the traditional standard, realistic botanical type studies. All right, so let's try drawing a few flowers, and again, because with these are all dry erase markers, so for me to draw in black and come back and color them, I'm going to contaminate all my colored markers. So I need to draw the flowers with a colored marker. So again, we'll just go through, let's say in a flower bed. Let's say we position, I'll try drawing like a few circular shapes where I'm going to position, I may have to change some of the colors on here. I want to jump to another color. So let's say we have something down here that's like this, and maybe a few up here that are more, a cup shape like this. So maybe we have one that's up here. So I'm jumping around, I'm spacing them a little differently. I want some interesting negative shapes to here. Maybe we'll have one that's just off that one there. And let's come back with some pink. So this is going to be a bed like with a lot of different colored tulips here. But you see how I'm kind of breaking, I want to carry some of these off. So some of these are overlapping, like so. And let's come in with some purple ones. So let's say we put like these are going to be dark. And let's pop in a few yellows. So this is going to be real colorful. So again, I guaranteed I am not going to be able to finish this and do a watercolor demonstration, but I'm showing you how I would begin plotting like a bed of multicolored flowers, something similar to this over here. Okay, so let's put a few more yellows in here. All right, so while I have this pen on it, let me just put like another yellow over here. So again, I'm thinking again of, maybe we'll have this one overlap this. I'm just going to give some color to this one here. So I'm having it overlap this red one here. So this was just plotting. Now, if I was doing this on a watercolor piece of paper, I would be using an erasable hard lead pencil, very lightly, just placing my bulbs. I won't even bother doing this yet, although I could place a few. But the importance is getting all these, because they're the main event. So you see my strokes are taking the upward look of the tulip itself. Let me just come in with So here, I'm just creating a little darkness in the interior of this one here, so there's some contrast. So there's like one tulip there. On some of the hot reds too, what I like to do is, when I'm painting or even doing colored pencils or pastels, is to use a warm underglaze. I do this on a red orange. I'm going to put some yellow down underneath for the inside of a red tulip. So again, these I'm going to have a little bit of the opening. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow on the interior of these. Let's come back with the red. So now I'm going to draw that. That's just plotting where I'm putting the tulip. Now I'm going to actually draw the tulip, 6 petals. So this is like the front center petal, and I slickly, negatively define the edge of this light yellow tulip. So here are these downward strokes. And we'll get a little more solid here. We're going to start to do the foreshortening on these side leaves. So petals rather. So there's 6 petals. So that's 3. Now we're going to come around the back. The center one is going to overlap the other 2. So I'm showing you that one. This will be squeezed in over here. This will be squeezed in here. So now I'm just doing downward strokes on the inside of the back of that tulip over here. Okay, so these 2 are growing in front of all of those. I don't have to be concerned with what's happening back there, but on your front row, now you can come back and establish what's happening, how these are growing. So if I just, again, the center of this is coming right through here. So we're just drawing like a nice soda straw stem down here. Here's the center of this one, and maybe you have it coming down over here. And I'm not bringing it all the way down, because what I want you to do is think of these nice leaves that need to be like intertwining. So I just start to crisscross them, and we start creating not only a front row of the flower heads, but a front row of the leaves and what's happening with them. So again, I'm just using the green line to just show you how I'm navigating through this. Okay, so let's move up and do something more complex up here, where, let's come back with these pinks. So here we have, all I'm going to do, this is that front petal. Now this is quite light, this marker. So what I may do is come in with another stronger pink. And we'll do the interior. I'm going to use my finger to kind of lift out a highlight there. So here's our darker interior on what we're seeing on the backs of those. And then I'm going to use it to kind of outline this petal and this petal over here and this petal over here. Okay, so now we have another one over here. Maybe we'll show a little more of the inside. So again, my strokes are taking the inside contours of what's happening, and this petal's more open, whereas this one's a little tighter. This is overlapping that one here. Let's come back with, I'm just darkening this. It's a little too much, but it's okay. Let's try this one. Okay, so I'm using this to delineate my petals now. This is a little darker purple, but you can see I'm doing a little bit of outlining. And now I'm going to, again, give a little bit of shadowing on the shadow that's happening as the cups on the back side contour in like my fingers are over here. And then let's just shadow the bottom of this tulip over here. I'm going to come back and then also darken this a little bit inside. And again, I'm giving a little bit of an outline. Over here. Okay, so as I have these two drawn, this is tilted a little bit that way. Let's have this stem, so the stem's going to come down through here. There's the thickness of the stem, and then again we can have some leaf interrupt that, and have another leaf all the way up over there. Here's another stem. This is leaning this way, So the stem is going to be coming down here. Let's give some nice, we can have to show the stem again and interrupt it again with another leaf. So I'm crisscrossing and creating some interesting leaves in the front row. All of these are a little taller the farther up, but some of them could have tall stems that are coming all the way down here. So as I'm working down here, I may start to bring down, let's say, all the way down here. We may show a little bit of some of those stems that are way up there, and they're going to be interrupted by some more tulip leaves that are growing a little farther back, so I may end them up here. So again, I'm creating an interesting leaf, some interesting obliques. There's some vertical stems, but the leaves are all at different angles and obliques, and your garden is starting to grow. Here's a light tulip, here's a light tulip. So I'm going to introduce a dark purple tulip. Just a, let's just dark purple. Okay, so here's a dark purple tulip. That's kind of growing behind these two. Let's do another one. Back over there. So we're introducing a dark contrasting tulip in the purple family, and we're showing just a little piece of it, but it's acting as an interesting dark shape, and it's breaking up the fact that the front row is showing all these fully drawn tulips, and this, so even though I have some tulips placed back there, I just added two that I didn't foresee, but I needed it just to have some dark contrasting shapes. Okay, so I'm just looking at how we're doing on time. I should jump into the painting. All right, so let me just, I'm going to just go back there and just set up. It'll just take me a minute or two, and I'll be right back with you. So I just moved back here, and again, I have everything planned ahead of time. When you've got a certain amount of time, get your brushes out ahead of time. I have my paints cleaned off pretty well. Again, you want to have your paints pretty clean, run them under the faucet so they're not contaminated, because you really want that fresh color when you're dealing with flesh, portraits, or flowers. All right, so I have one tulip drawn especially larger than the others, and I would call that my focal tulip. And I'm going to be going in and painting these all different colors. So sometimes what I'll do is, if I have a few pinks, just as I did up there, I may do all the yellow ones at one time, the pinks at one time, the reds at a certain time. So again, and I've got two containers of water. One is for rinsing, and the other is to go into for clean water, so that we come into the painting with, again, some nice, brilliant, clean color. This is a large brush. I'm just going to try this out on this large tulip. So I'm trying to decide if I'll make it some kind of a two-tone. So we'll come in with, this is a lemon yellow. It'll be like a little yellow and a little bit of red. So that's, again, lemon yellow is kind of a cool yellow. Let's come back in with a warm yellow. That's cadmium. Medium or railing is a warm yellow. You can see the difference. And I'm going to fit that in the back. Now I'm leaving this pretty dry in through there so one doesn't bleed into the other. So it's nice to do, again, if you come in with a larger brush, and the rounds hold more water in them, you're going to get a looser, juicier paint, and more of a fusion, an uncontrollable fusion of how the colors, the different passages or glazes mix. So that was my yellows. I'm going to come back with just a darker yellow. If you have raw sienna or yellow ochre is good. I just downsized to a smaller brush. It says fewer hairs. It's a number 12. This is sable. And we're just going to come in with that raw sienna or yellow ochre down near the base where it's more shadow over there. And I'm going to do the same on the inside where I'm near that dried edge. I'm just putting a little bit of that darker yellow in there. All right, so now if I just went outside that a little bit. Okay, so that's our first glaze. So that's all pretty wet. That lemon yellow is starting to dry in some areas. We're going to come in now. I'm going to use, this is my this is a synthetic lettering brush. This is that Grumbacher number 12. So again, your sables they have more hair, the fine hairs, they hold so much more water. I'm coming in with more paint now, and I don't want it to be so out of control. So I'm using a synthetic brush, there's fewer hairs. And let's come back with a nice this is like a medium to dark cadmium orange. So not a lot of water on the brush, and let's try it out. This is the warmer side of the tulip, and wow, that's like a real hot color. So again, I put the side of the hairs down to get a broader stroke, and as you come up, you want to kind of lift the brush up to get more of the point. And I'm going to jump into a cold red. Alizarin crimson is good, rose madder genuine is good. These are colder reds. But again, they're sitting on top of yellow, so they're going to turn a bright orange. Okay, so we're going to come in on this is more the shadow side. My sun's coming from the upper right. And just so that I remember that, I'm going to draw a little sun up here on my tape. And I don't have the whole perimeter of my watercolor paper taped down today. I just have a few pieces in the corner. So this is still wet. This is, again, that cooler red, either alizarin, rose madder, genuine, and see the difference? It's cooler. We're putting that on the shadowed side, kind of coming up. So it's going to be one of those two-tone tulips. And then I'm just rinsing out a little bit less water on my brush now, because now I'm going to come in on the back side. I want to get that little darker red. Less water. And again, this particular synthetic lettering brush, if you look against my white paper, to see how the hairs can split like so? Okay, so I'm splitting them because it's not sopping wet with water, and I'm just splitting them. I'm going to come with downward strokes on the back side of the cup, the inside of the cup. So again, this is a cooler red, and my strokes are just kind of coming down, taking the back contour of this. I want to get back to my point. I'm just going to go back into that, either your yellow ochre. I'm just going to get a little more yellow ochre on the tip with the dark red. And now I'm interested in my point, where I'm going to negatively define the inside of the back of the cup, getting a little bolder in the color here. And then I'm going to come back down here also with some upward strokes to show the separation or the division between each of the petals, and just a little more shadowing over here on the left side. Well, we have a big storm starting outside. I'm hearing it come down on the roof. Let's come back into this is a hot orange, and it's a medium orange. I just want to pop a little more color of the orange on the inside of that back cup. And then again, I'm trying to define the petal shape to the right and left. Okay, and then we have those ribs that are like in the middle of the petal leaves, so I'm just popping a few strokes of that in there also. Okay, so now we still have some red on my brush. I want to take that red, I'm just going to like run it down into the top of my stem. And let's just come up right away, and every time I rinse my brush out in the large pail for rinse water, and then go into my clean water to capture nice clean color coming in. So this is called cadmium green pale, and it's just a nice base color. So I'm going to put the stroke from the bottom of my stem coming up and meeting up into the red. Let's come back with the darker green. Maybe I'll do a little sap green with a little cerulean blue. And now, because this is a nice round brush, comes to a very nice point, I'm going to go on the left shadowed side, and we're going to come down with a stroke that's thicker under the base. And we're just going to drag that down so we have a little bit of the shadow underneath the width of that cup tulip. Coming up with a little more red just to also accentuate. Sometimes you'll see the color come down underneath that tulip. All right, so now I'm looking at this. We've got fluorescent lights in the ceiling. I've got a couple of brushes. These are flats. Only your flats come with these nice chiseled, they have nice chiseled edges on the handles. So I'm going to come in with one, and I'm going to see if I can scratch out some highlighted edges to this front petal. So again, I usually wait until it starts to lose its shine and it's pretty shiny. Let's try it on the back petal. So the back petal has a contour. The center petal comes in with a round stroke here and there, and then we're going to come from the base up, or we can come from the top down. Let's do top down. I'm going to define the outer highlighted edges of this central petal over here, so we're scratching through a nice highlighted edge. You could also come through and lift out those little ribbed seams that are in the center of the flower also. Okay, and then what I want to do is I'm going to come with the blue. I'm going to come with cobalt blue. So again, some of the centers on these flowers, not all of them, may have some dark decorative graphic designs like I showed you in the center of the flower over here. So the center is starting to dry. I have some unpainted white edges at the highlight of this. I'm going to come back in with this nice cobalt blue, and we're just going to, I'm creating like the tongue-shaped edge of the middle petal, and then I'm just going to come in with a little bit of that blue. I'll come back with a little bit of hot orange and just kind of feather that up so it's, I don't want it to be too dry, but it's drying just a bit. So now we have a nice rich dark center. Okay, let's move to another petal. So that was our large focal flower, which I paid a lot of attention to, and I gave you a lot of step-by-step tips on how to paint, which you can take with you to move to all your other flowers in the garden. But let's try, since I still have these viable puddles of yellow and reds here, I'm not going to waste them. I'm going to do a couple more of these yellow and red tulips. So let's move one maybe over here. We'll bring it over here. So here's my lemon yellow, and I'm bringing it in. I'm leaving the upper tips to my front petals dry. That was lemon yellow. Let's come to the base of that with that warmer cad yellow. I can run that cad yellow down my stem also. And I'm going to feed some cadmium yellow. So we're working on dry paper, but this is our first passage of glaze. So this is going to be like, it's almost like pre-wetting with yellow. This is your cad yellow, a little thicker with more pigment, less water. And let's come back with either yellow ochre or sienna, whichever one you have. That's a darker yellow, more of a mustard color. And let's come in, we're going to feed it. Remember, this is the underside of this cup. This is more in shadow down here. So here's the underside of the cup, and we can actually feed that yellow ochre into the stem to create a blue. And I'm going to come back with a little more of that yellow ochre, and we're going to feed it on the right side of the inner petal. So it's like the back side of a cup shape. And this was a different brush. So this is a little smaller tulip. This is a number 10. Yeah, it's a number 10 round. Let's come back with those reds. So I'm going to do a hot red again. So this is a synthetic brush, which even though it's a round, I can split the hair. So you can see my paint's just sitting on the tips. There's not a lot of water on this brush. And you see how I'm flaring my hair. So we can come back in, and we're just going to have some nice strokes from the base up. Didn't stay flared, but here we go. And then we're going to feed some of that hot orange on this side of the tulip that's receiving our sunlight over here. And let's come back with that darker red. So again, I rinsed out my brush. I'm going to go into the clean water. Let's go for a darker red, either rose madder genuine, alizarin crimson. Not a lot of water on the brush, and again, I'm going to split the hairs on my brush, and let's come in at the base on the shadowed side. So sometimes as you come in and you're having so much fun, you may see the size of your tulip expanding beyond your original drawing because your brush just flared out beyond your original drawing. That's fine. You're not going to pay attention to those pre-sketched lines anyway. I'm going to again come back. I'm going to pre-mix a little yellow ochre with a little alizarin crimson. And I'm looking to get more of a point now where I'm just kind of, you can actually draw like, I'm going and creating like an outline, which I'm going to come back and actually do over here. So even though that looks solid, I can come in with a little more line and define more distinct outline, I can come back. I scratched out some of the seams. So I have some highlighted edge. I'm going to come right next to it with the dark shadow over here. So as this is starting to dry, I can come back and also split the hairs on my brush. And I want to get some of those nice. So I'm angling them away from the center seam of this. So I'm getting a little more detail on this one here. And I don't have to do it too much on the rest of the flower, but just that little bit of detail is kind of nice to introduce. So this guy's pretty wet, and I just want to come back in. I'm going to come back in with the blue in the center. So again, I've left an unpainted white, it's dry white, between where the top of the front petals is hitting the back of the inside. So I'm coming back, and we're going to feed in a little this nice blue center. You can see where it's dry, I'm getting a slick hard edge, and then it can feed up into the back petal. I rinse that out over some clean water. I'm going to come back with a little bit of that cat orange, and I'm just going to feather up some of those strokes.
Rita, will you please call 7003? Thank you.
I'm just coming with the dark red again, and I just want to do a little more of these upward strokes. This is the seam, this is the outside of this petal here. And while this is still wet, so I have an underglaze of yellow, and I introduced a little bit of that red. Let's just come back with that light cadmium green pale, and we're going to run this down, just like as a base color. Let's come back with some cerulean blue. And I'm going to come back with all that dark red.
Mrs. Boy, you can turn out there. Thank you.
So we're introducing a nice cast shadow on that. So before I jump into a few more flowers, I'm watching the time where, again, however I painted these, I'm showing you how you proceed in painting the other tulips. I'm going to do a leaf. So you have an option to do a leaf with like a flat brush or a round brush, or even a combination of both. But I usually like to put in like a yellow underglaze. So this is a little cadmium with yellow ochre mixed together. So let's say I'm looking at this leaf here. So I fed in one stroke there. I'm going to come back with a little water to that's right. And I'm going to come in with cerulean blue. So I'm not even coming with the green. This is a cerulean blue into those two yellows. So I put the loaded brush, this is that same number 10 round, at the base. And again, so we're getting an interesting green. I'm just filling this in over here. And what I want to do, I'm going to come back with a little red. So I went with the cool red. I'm just going to run that up like as if it's like a little bit of a furrow on that leaf. Let's try a few more other leaves. So this is just cadmium yellow, and let's just feed it in. So there's two leaves overlapping. This is the back leaves. This is cadmium yellow. I'm going to come back with just water, and we drag that lighter yellow up to the top. And let's try a different green. Let's try sap green, which is sitting and mixing into this cad yellow. So again, I feed it at the base, so it's a little darker down near the base. And I'm going to just rinse out that brush a little bit, and then we're just going to drag this up. Like so. Let me come back with a little cerulean blue. I'm just going to feed that make it a little darker where it's positioning itself down below this. And let's just come in with a little dark edge on the side here. And I'm going to do the same over here. This was looking a little dull. This was just cerulean blue, and I'm just coming with the dark edge on its left side over there. I'm going to mix some cad yellow with some cadmium orange, and let's try doing a leaf. Let's just put one up here. So we're going to make a leaf up in here. So I'm putting a little bit of cad orange first down, and let's just come back. We'll try some sap green, and we're going to put the sap green at the base. like so. So that's like a two-tone leaf. So now these are starting to dry. So I want to show you what you can do with the leaves for yourselves in the future. I'm going to go back into this. It's like a hot red, and it's a red and orange mix. So this is a smaller brush, you know, maybe like a number 6. Comes to a nice point. So this is starting to dry. So what I want to do is I'm just going to paint a little bit of a red line on the left, and maybe come back with a brighter red, and I'm going to try to do like some a few fine lines kind of coming up in there. I can come over here. This is starting to dry. It's losing its shine. You have options. You can either come and scratch out or do both. I'm going to scratch out a highlighted edge over here, so I'm coming in about a 1/4 inch, and I'm just kind of pulling out as if it's kind of, the leaf is kind of furling in like this. And I can come back and I can do a little bit of red lines, that kind of linear vein pattern on that one also. So I'm just showing how you can just make the leaves a little more interesting than just going in with the pre-mixed green. Let's try a nice like hot pink flower. Okay, so I'm going to go into opera. Okay, and let's place that opera like on this. So opera is a beautiful kind of a hot pink. It's kind of like a cool pink. And I don't have, even though it's a sable brush, I don't have a lot of water in this. I'm going a little heavier with the saturation of color right now. I'm going to bring it down the opening of my stem, the top of the stem. And then as I come around the back, I'm going to mix like a dark purple in with the opera. You can also add a blue to it, but I have purple right next to it, so I just jumped into that. So I'm going to do downward strokes now, defining the back petals. And again, so you can use the broad side of your brush to get a darker, and then I'm just defining the tops, the dried unpainted tops of the front petals using the point. Of this particular brush. And then I'm going above and beyond the brush to introduce like a white highlight there. Okay, so with the paint I've left over on this brush, I'm splitting the hairs so you could see how I split them like this. I'm going back into that darker purple. I'm going to split the hairs again, and I'm going to come up from the base. This is starting to dry, but it's not very wet. So we're going to come with upward strokes, and we're going to create these like beautiful striated patterns that we see on some of the fancier tulips, just to get a little more pattern going. And let me come back with a nice blue. This is called Verditer blue, and I'm just going to pop a little more blue, maybe in here for just a little more interesting color. And we'll come on the bottom again, where I'm defining, there's like a separation of the petals here. We'll drag that farther down. And I want to make use of my leftover puddles now. So I have a puddle of opera, and we'll move someplace else. Let's put the opera over here behind this flower here. So again, this one is locked in just behind this. So it's lighter in value than the inside back side of this tulip over here. I'm going to use the point of this to just kind of create the separation, the contour outlines of my back petals, and then I can define my front petals also. I'm going to come back with a little bit of that Verditer blue and mix it in with just a touch of opera. I'm just going to shadow the left side and maybe the base over here. So again, that's Verditer blue. If you don't have that, you can use cerulean or sky blue. And I'm just creating a nice dark interior value on the back petal so that the inside cup of this flower is darker than the outside values of the front petals. I'm going to come back with a little more opera. And you can see I've left like an unpainted edge, so we have white highlights on those front petals. And here I'm going just beyond my painting with a thin, lost and found edge, almost creating like a painted highlight. I want to do that over here also. We're going to come in over here, over there. And as this is starting to dry, I'm just defining the separation of the petals where they're overlapping. So this is painted a little differently, but similar colors. Let's come back with those chiseled edges again, and let's pull out a nice highlighted edge separating the petals over here and over there. Maybe the back petal over here. We have the back petal over there. And I'm going to come up with this, this is Cabin Green Pale, so I came down with the opera and the purple into its stem, and I'm just coming down and running this overneath that to dry. Sometimes I try to do it while it's wet, but you can gather that. So here's the stem for this one. It's running all the way down here. And so on. So you can see how I'm proceeding. And again, your choice of colors, we can go with some really rich dark purples. We could introduce some solid yellows or something more in the pink, a warm pink. So warm pink is a permanent rose. So here's permanent rose, and let's just put that on this one over here. So you can see the difference where here's the red on top of a yellow underglaze, but here this is permanent rose just on top of white. So you can really see this color. It's a little dull compared to the other flowers, but we can always, you know, get a little different. So I may mix a little bit of the permanent rose with a little opera, and let's just come in. I'm going to just define this outer. I'm using the point of this brush to define where my limitations are. So this tulip is existing behind that pink one. And let me just get a little darker. So if I come and add a little purple, you've got quinacridone violet is a good one. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of a darker red. And I just want to get very dark so that this tulip is in front of that. It's popping out a little more. And let's come and do the interior. I'm going to get much darker on the interior now so you can appreciate the deep shadow that's inside this tulip's a little more closed. So that was a quinacridone violet with a little bit of alizarin crimson. So this guy's sitting to the left of him, and I'm just going to drag all of that color down into its stem. We'll come up and meet that with a nice medium green. I think this is Hooker's green. I may add a little touch of yellow ochre to it, but so I'm just painting it in its true state here, and it comes up and meets up with the beautiful reds here, and we create a little shadow underneath. I'm just going to do a little darker here on this particular stem. So as this is drying, so I left a little more white. Sometimes you have flowers, and I'm just looking at these. This is a sample from a seed company, a bulb company rather. There's some two-tone, look at these. I mean, they almost look like the paint's poured on them. So you've got a white tulip with these deep variations of strong contrast in color. So I left a little bit of white showing on this one here. So as it starts to lose its shine, it's a good time to jump in. Let's scratch out some of the edging on this particular petal edge. And then we have those ribs that are like right in the middle. And I'll come back with a small round brush. We can actually paint some of those seams in with a darker color. I'm just going to darken the left side of that. We could come in and darken like the inside of this fold over here. So you're always going back and just checking up on where you can create a little more drama. You know, as you move from flower to flower, or stem to stem, leaf to leaf. I'm darkening that one over there. Let's come a little more purple underneath there. And I just want to try a few leaves using a flat brush. And I know time is marching on here, so I won't. We're certainly not going to finish this, but I just want to show you some variations of leaves. So this is a flat, 1-inch flat. So I mix yellow ochre with emerald green. So here you can use the fat broad side of the brush to capture like the lower, fatter part. And we can come back, I'm going to just go into the tips with the darker hooker's green, maybe in a little dark brown. And I'm splitting the hairs on this. We're going back in while this is wet. I can twist and turn and I get some lovely vein pattern in that leaf right over here. Again, come back with a smaller round brush to give a little more detail. So I'm going in hooker's green with a little burnt sienna. And let's just give like a nice dark outside edge over here to pop it out. And again, your strokes can go a little beyond, like I'm doing here, can just a little beyond where we've painted. So I'm going back on this one over here too, where again, a nice dark outline, that's a kind of a lost and found line, leaving a little space of white of the paper showing through. It's now creating like a highlighted edge. And we could do the same on some of the stems. I'm going to come up here and do the same. So this guy we added in, so you can see that little line. So it's a way of bringing the white energy from the outside negative areas, because we're painting with a white background, into the piece. Okay, as I'm looking at this over here, I'm just going to some cobalt blue. I just want to add a little more shadow, suggesting that this is getting very dark because of the closeness, the proximity of these two. So I just got darker. And again, I went in, this was still a little wet, so I was careful as to how much I had on my brush to go back in. And having that blue, I'm going to add a little blue underneath the shadow of the stem over here. And maybe a little bit of that blue on the inside of those two flowers there. So I think that's about all the time we have for today, but you can see as I proceeded, the stylization of how I attempt to go in to have fun using different watercolor techniques and scratching out and top glazing, letting paint surge while they're wet versus coming in with a dry top glaze, splitting the hairs of a brush to create these unusual, beautifully feathered textures on the outer petals. All has to do with the timing of is it wet, is it dry, and so on. And then that outlining is very nice. Again, I'm trying to bring some of the reds and purples of the flowers into the green of my leaves. Also, there's a little more harmony in the palette of your painting. So that's all for today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, and have a great week of painting.